Welcome to episode 2 of Woman Unravelled. I'm Michelle Haslam, definite unravelled woman at the age of 46. Holy crap, stuff has happened. But today I'm going to be talking about mainly perimenopause, actually, because I think that's probably the thing that unravels the majority of us over the age of 40. And it's going to be a big topic, I suspect, over the next however long this podcast goes on for, years or decades, if I'm lucky. So at the time of posting, at the time of recording, I've just posted my first podcast, which was my intro one. Go check that out if you haven't listened to it yet. But it is going down very well. I have some great friends who have given me some positive feedback. No one said anything bad yet. That doesn't mean it's not terrible. When I looked back at it after I'd recorded it, I didn't like the lighting. Still not keen on the lighting setup here, so I need to work that one out. The sound didn't come out quite as I wanted, so I've got this little lapel mic here, but I'm wondering if I need a boom mic. Anyway, I will work it all out as time goes on. But we don't let it stop us, we carry on. So, as of the time of recording this, it's the summer holidays, the middle of the summer holidays, and I'm going slightly mad. The kids are here about half of the time, and that means that I do get half of the week to work, which is great, but I do need a bit of calming down time after the kids have gone. And I also don't always want to work every single day that they're not here. So I'm juggling, definitely juggling. So with the previous podcast, the second I pressed publish, I started getting major imposter syndrome, wondering why anyone would want to listen to me. But as a friend suggested, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's about what I want to do, what I want to talk about. So that's why I'm here. I'm talking about the things I want to talk about. So, yes, I'm talking about perimenopause today, and I'll talk a little bit about my journey. First of all, for anyone who doesn't know, there's a few different myths about perimenopause. I just want to debunk some of those. I'm no expert, I'm no medical expert in any way, shape, or form, but I've done a fair amount of research over the past 2 or 3 years since I got diagnosed with it. So I know a bit, and I just want to share my experience. Nothing in today's episode is medical advice. Absolutely not in the slightest. Okay, this is experience and my research, and everybody's different. Okay, everyone's got to do their own thing. Right. So myth busting. First of all, the first thing is everyone thinks perimenopause is hot flushes, night sweats, periods stopping or becoming less regular. None of those happened to me at the beginning. That wasn't any of the symptoms that happened to me. So it's not just those things. There are other things too. And I'll come to that in a minute. Another myth is that you're infertile when you're in perimenopause. No, don't fall for that one. There is a good chance that you still got a fair few of your eggs lying around inside you, ready to creep out and give you a little baby. So be careful with that one. Perimenopause, we think it only happens to us in our 50s. Utter bullshit. In fact, from the age of 35 plus tends to be when people not always, but can start to get perimenopausal symptoms. And other people think it's a really short phase, but perimenopause can be up to 10 years. Right, symptoms. But just bear in mind, I'm sure I saw somewhere there are over 60 symptoms. So these are the main ones. Doesn't mean other things that are going on aren't a perimenopausal symptom. Okay, so hot flushes, periods becoming irregular, mood changes, vaginal dryness, loss of sex drive, brain fog, aches and pains, frozen shoulder. This is apparently a really common one. I haven't had it. Facial hair, UTIs, which is urine infections, and heart palpitations. So those are some of the main symptoms. Right, so here's my experience, okay? And I think everyone has slightly different experiences, but I love to know how other people are going through this. So I'm going to tell you how I've done it. So first of all, I did have my kids later in life. I was 35 and 38 when I had my two kids. And at that point, I wasn't even thinking about perimenopause because I had my pregnancy hormones. And then I had, I was in the throes of young motherhood or young children motherhood. I, I was knackered. I was knackered, absolutely exhausted, and not really thinking about anything to do with perimenopause. So, yes, I had elements of anxiety and anger and that sort of thing. But at the time, I didn't put any of that down to perimenopause. Who knows? It could have been. But those were my main symptoms when I crept into my 40s, my early 40s, 42, 43. By the age of 43, my rage was intense. And it would come from absolutely nowhere. It was, Red Ross on Friends, if anyone has watched Friends, but I would have those moments frequently. So my poor husband at the time and kids, they would have to deal with me screaming at them out of nowhere, out of seemingly nowhere. And then 5 minutes later, I'd be fine again and have to go around and apologize. It was intense, very, very intense. I had anxiety, I had brain fog, and I felt very unable to cope with difficult situations. I never had hot sweats. I have at times had temperature regulation issues, but I've never sweated it out. Sweated? Is that the right word? Sweat it out? Yeah, I've never done that. My periods, to start with, regular as clockwork, between 26, 27 days every single month. And I was on nothing. I wasn't on the pill. I wasn't on HRT at this point. I didn't have any unnatural hormones in my body. But yeah, the rage was bad. At 43, it was so bad. I went to the doctors because the guidelines, I don't know if they've changed actually since, but the guidelines at the time said that if you were under the age of 45, it wasn't to be suspected as perimenopause. Absolute bullshit, but that's what it was. It might still be that, I'm not entirely sure. So I went to the doctor, they got me a blood test. What I didn't realize at the time is that the blood test has to be done on a very certain day of the month in order for it to show if you are perimenopausal or not. So when I went and got the blood test results, I went into the doctor's surgery and it was a young lady doctor, and she said, "It shows that you're fine." So at that point, I said to her, "I want HRT." And she said no to HRT. And I cried at that time because I was desperate for a solution. Life was not good. And she took that crying as a sign of depression and wanted to give me antidepressants. And I said, "Oh, no, 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 I will not be taking those. Thank you." This is actually really common that doctors do this. So bear that in mind if you're going to the GP. They often want to give you antidepressants before they even think about HRT. Not every doctor, but this is what happened to me. It's really, really common. Afterwards, I went away. I wasn't on HRT. I went away for a few months and I read the Davina book. And I can't remember what it's called, but essentially it's Davina McCall and one of her, I don't know, friends who is a perimenopausal doctor. They wrote this book and I crammed that information into my brain before going back. And this time I requested an older female doctor, so someone in their 50s who I knew would get it. And she did get it. So she took my symptoms rather than a blood test. She didn't even offer me a blood test at this point. She took my symptoms. She knew I was more educated at this point because I went in with the information. I knew exactly what I wanted from her. I knew how much I wanted. And I knew that she had to go off of my symptoms despite the fact I was under the age of 45. So she did. She did. And thank goodness. And she did prescribe me with HRT. So at the time I was on estrogen. I was on a patch called Estradot, something like that, and a progesterone, which was an oral tablet that I took half of the month. And that's how I started. And things did slightly improve. The rage definitely lessened. I'm not sure. I mean, the insomnia, it was good and bad at times. It was slightly better. Anxiety, that sort of thing, remained. Now, about 3 months later, I split up from my husband. We were separated. We had to still live in the same house for the next 6 months. And to say that it was a stressful time is a bit of an understatement. My emotions were in a total turmoil. And so they upped the prescription to the estradiol went up to 100. Is it 100 milligrams? So I think it was 100 milligrams of the estradiol. But it didn't really seem to make much difference, the 50 to 100, and they didn't up my progesterone either. My periods started to become more sporadic, mainly after I left my husband and went into my own house. At that point, my periods did start to become more sporadic and heavier and a lot less comfortable. So at that point, I asked the doctor, rather than being on the HRT, which was kind of working, kind of not, can I go on to the pill? So she put me on, bearing in mind my age, uh, she put me on some sort of, I think it was a combined pill. Do you know what? I can't remember. Don't even know what it's called. And I was on that for a few months. Symptom wise, I was no different, I would say, to the HRT. But what I did was I took it all the time so that I was having very few periods. I did have the odd bleed, but I had very few periods. And it was at this point I go to a chiropractor every 2 months for maintenance visits. And my chiropractor and we'd been talking about HRT. She's a similar age to me. She's going through her own perimenopause. And she was telling me that some women, and this is not from a doctor, this is not even from my chiropractor, this is what she suggested for me, having known me and my history. She says that some women are estrogen dominant and we need progesterone in order to even that out. Some people don't need this, some people do. So she referred me to a Facebook group which had loads of research articles in, genuine articles from real medical professionals. And it was fascinating. And I eventually went down the route of stopping my pill, completely taking out all estrogen, extra estrogen from my body, and just taking extra progesterone. That progesterone was a cream, which I had to pay for privately. And this is not cheap, really not cheap. So that was in March of this year, 2025. And I haven't had a period since. So that's a bit of a bonus for that one. Apparently, that is fairly common to either have reduced periods or not have any periods at all. I have had a relatively high dose. I don't want to talk about doses and things on here because what I don't want people to do is just copy, because every single person is going to need something different. But you've got to do your own research on this. But yes, so I was on a relatively high dose. It did help. I reduced it right down. I sort of halved it, and that was too much. So now I'm sort of somewhere in the middle now, and just slowly reducing it till all the estrogen is out of my body. Now, here's the thing. This is my journey. Okay? I'm just explaining to you my journey. I'm not a doctor. What happens with you could be completely different. What works for you could be completely different. So please don't take this as gospel, as this is what we should all be doing. But what I have to say is my symptoms are far improved. Far improved. My anxiety, which was through the roof at one point with the whole co-parenting new life thing. That was through the roof at one point. So that's a relief to have that die down. I do want to talk about some other things that have helped and might help you. So first of all, bit of walking and daily exercising. And when I say exercising, bit of a stretch. Just keep the body moving. I do find that I ache so much more if I don't walk or stretch my body a little bit. Therapy. I've been going to therapy now for 18 months. And it has made huge amount of difference. Find the right therapist. It is most definitely worth it. I have to say, diet-wise, still not great. That's something I'm working on. I will talk about this in future episodes. I'm someone who has had binge eating disorder. I struggle with overeating, and I'm working on it. Big time working on it, but it's not something, nutrition's super important for your perimenopausal symptoms, but that's not something I can say I've cracked yet. So you might be thinking to yourself, right, it does sound like I'm perimenopausal. I have no idea what the fuck to do. So the next steps to take are to go to your GP. So it might sound like I don't trust my GP, and that's not entirely true. They have their information, but they're there to help you. So go to your GP. But do your own research as well. So go in educated, read the Davina book. Uh, if you want access to that Facebook group that I was talking about with all the research articles, let me know. I'm available on all the socials. If you want to contact me, you're more than welcome to. I'm happy to drop you the information on that Facebook group. The other thing is mindset wise, and again, I'm going to talk about this in a future episode. Really try and think positively. Your mindset is the key to having a much happier life. So, working on all these other physical symptoms is great, but if your mind isn't in the right place, none of it's going to work. So, look, I would absolutely love to know what kind of perimenopausal symptoms you've got. Have you got anything wild and crazy? I'd love to know that. I'd love to do a podcast episode on absolutely insane symptoms, like a perimenopausal what the fuck type moment. And I want to end the podcast just to say, you are not alone. Okay, I'm going to say this, I think, every single end of podcast, because you're not alone. Whatever it is you're going through, there is someone else going through it. And I have talked about setting up a community of some sort. If there's a demand, I'll do it. If there's a demand, I will do it. And we can all chat this shit together. Right, I'm going to leave it there. It has been a pleasure. I will see you in episode 3.